Hi everyone, welcome back to our Stories channel. Today, we're going to dive into a captivating story about dreams, jealousy, betrayal, and forgiveness. It's the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors. So, get comfortable and let's embark on this amazing journey together. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, and he was his father's favorite. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children and showed this love by giving Joseph a special gift, a beautiful coat of many colors. This coat made Joseph stand out and made his brothers very jealous. Joseph had a gift for interpreting dreams. One night, he had a dream and eagerly shared it with his brothers. "We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." This dream made his brothers even more jealous and angry. They said, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" But Joseph had another dream and told it to his brothers and his father. "The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Even his father, Jacob, was puzzled. "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" Though Jacob was confused, he kept the dream in mind. Joseph's brothers' jealousy turned into hatred. One day, when Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were grazing their flocks far from home, the brothers saw an opportunity. As Joseph approached, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said. "Let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him." Reuben, the eldest brother, tried to save Joseph. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben planned to come back later and rescue Joseph. So, when Joseph arrived, they stripped him of his beautiful coat and threw him into an empty cistern. As they sat down to eat their meal, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelite traders coming from Gilead. Judah, another brother, suggested, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to these Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." The brothers agreed, and they sold Joseph to the traders for 20 pieces of silver. The traders took Joseph to Egypt. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in everything he did. Joseph found favor in Potiphar's eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. However, Joseph's troubles were far from over. Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph and tried to seduce him, but Joseph refused, saying, "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Despite his refusals, she continued to pursue him. One day, she caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Potiphar's wife was furious. She called her household servants and said, "Look, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed." She kept Joseph's cloak beside her until Potiphar came home. Then she told him the same story. Potiphar was furious and had Joseph thrown into prison. But the Lord was with Joseph even in prison. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So, the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. While in prison, Joseph met two of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, who had been thrown into prison. Both of them had dreams the same night, and they were troubled because there was no one to interpret them. Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." Joseph interpreted the dream, saying, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer." The chief baker, seeing that the interpretation was favorable, said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Joseph replied, "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Joseph's interpretations came true. The chief cupbearer was restored to his position, but he forgot about Joseph. 2 years later, Pharaoh had 2 dreams that troubled him. In the first dream, he saw 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 skinny cows. In the second dream, he saw 7 healthy heads of grain being swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. None of Pharaoh's magicians could interpret the dreams. Then the chief cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about him. Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was brought out of the dungeon. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream you can interpret it." Joseph replied, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams, and Joseph interpreted them. The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to store surplus grain during the 7 good years to prepare for the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh was impressed and appointed Joseph as the second in command of Egypt, giving him authority over the entire land. Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, gathering and storing grain during the 7 years of abundance. When the 7 years of famine began, Egypt had enough food, and people from all over came to buy grain from Joseph. Come to Egypt. Meanwhile, back in Canaan, Jacob and his family were affected by the famine. Hearing that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob sent his sons, except for Benjamin, to buy food. When Joseph's brothers arrived, they did not recognize him, but he recognized them. Joseph decided to test his brothers to see if they had changed. He accused them of being spies and imprisoned them for 3 days. Then he released them, keeping Simeon as a hostage, and told them to bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, as proof of their honesty. The brothers returned home and told Jacob everything. Reluctantly, Jacob allowed Benjamin to go with them back to Egypt. When the brothers returned with Benjamin, Joseph was overwhelmed with emotion but did not reveal his identity yet. He hosted a feast for them, giving Benjamin 5 times as much food as the others. Then Joseph tested them again by placing his silver cup in Benjamin's sack and accusing him of theft. The brothers were distraught and pleaded for Benjamin's release, showing their willingness to sacrifice themselves for their brother. Moved by their sincerity, Joseph could no longer keep his identity hidden. He revealed himself to his brothers, saying, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" His brothers were terrified, but Joseph reassured them, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Joseph sent for his father Jacob and the entire family to come and live in Egypt. Pharaoh welcomed them and gave them the best land in Goshen. Jacob and his sons were reunited with Joseph, and they lived in peace and prosperity in Egypt. And that is the story of Joseph, a tale of dreams, betrayal, and forgiveness. It teaches us that even in the darkest times. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.